Candace Lightner is the founder of Mothers Against Drunk Driving and has long been recognized for reshaping the nation's attitude and behaviors surrounding impaired motorists. She now leads the group We Save Lives, continuing a 44-year career of successfully shifting social norms. Welcome to the Science of Good, where we sit down with cause leaders who are disrupting the status quo, tackling our toughest societal problems, and seeking better ways to spark change. Hi, friends. Welcome to another edition of the Science of Good. I'm Rashonda Pratt here with my friend and colleague, Kevin Smith, and we have a treat today. We have Candace Lightner, who's considered the mother of nonprofit movements. And Kevin, we're really excited to dive into this conversation to really help other nonprofits who are navigating causes and making a change in the world.
Well, thanks so much, Rashonda, and we're so happy to have you with us, Candace.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Great. Well, you're best known as the founder of Mothers Against Drunk Driving, and your founding MAD has inspired so many people and saved so many lives. Rashonda and I are in the business of changing behavior, so we know how difficult that can be. Your movements changed behavior by changing cultural norms. Can you tell us if that was your starting point? Is that what you set out to do?
So this is what I set out to do. Actually, what did I set out to do? I didn't even know when I started MAD. Because I started it right after she was killed. So I had no idea how serious the problem was, what the numbers were, anything in terms of why we had this problem. All I knew is that the man who killed her probably would not go to jail because that's the way the system worked at the time. And I found that incredibly unjust, and I wanted to change the system. And so I blamed the system as much as I blamed him because he was a multiple repeat offender drunk driver who still had his license to drive, who was, still carrying on normally, and which I didn't think should have happened. So I actually set out to change the system, the criminal justice system, and along the way, changed many other things as well.
I mean, you changed everything, changed what was socially acceptable, changed norms around behavior at social events and what was, how we treat one another as friends, and colleagues. Just amazing work. 400,000 lives saved. I can't imagine a more fantastic legacy than that.
Oh, thank you.
You talked a little bit when you started this, not really knowing the numbers, and Kevin touched upon that, saving 400,000 lives, growing MAD to more than 400 chapters, passing more than 700 state and national bills. What was one of the toughest battles for the movement?
Raising the drinking age to 21 was probably the toughest and the most meaningful and the most impactful. This was done. We started doing this at the chapter level, at the state level. I was in California, which already had a 21-year drinking age, so that wasn't the problem. But what we saw was that some states had 18, 19, 20, 21, and so the teens would drive over from state to state, picking the lowest drinking age. And what happened was something we called blood borders, in which they would crash crossing over after drinking. And so we decided there should be a uniform drinking age. And since I think, and I'm not sure about this, I don't remember this really well now, but I think at the time the majority of the states were 21. So we decided to go with that for that reason and a number of other reasons. But we just felt that was the best age in terms of reducing crash and injuries. So we set about doing it first at the local level, and that's at the state level. And so we asked our chapters in the states that had lower drinking ages to get them raised to 21. Some were able to do that, many were not. And after a year or so of frustration on this issue and not getting the results we wanted to see, we decided to take it to the national level. And so, I got the bill introduced in Congress, and that really started it. And of course, we were opposed by the alcohol industry and some student union group. But the majority of the people supported us. We had a number of organizations. We started something called SOS, Save Our Students. And we had 21 organizations, raising the drinking age to 21, supporting this, including the National PTA and several other major national organizations. We had a fabulous media strategy and campaign strategy. And so, but it wasn't easy. I mean, I was lobbying until 2 and 3 and 4 in the mornings many times. I just moved into DC during this whole process. And as it turned out, at the time, I remember the press calling me at some ungodly hour the next morning and telling me that it was, at that time, was the fastest bill ever to come out of Congress. And I thought it was the slowest because it was just so tiring and exhausting. So I would say 21. And the biggest support we had was from President Reagan. And at that time, as you know, Reagan was against, he was really for states' rights, and he didn't like to do things that penalized states who didn't do things. And that's what we were proposing. And so it was a real big coup to get him on our side, which we did. And that was probably one of our biggest advantages, was having the support of the White House.
What do you think caused him to get on board with you, Candace?
My understanding from Elizabeth Dole, who was Secretary of Transportation, became a very close friend and mentor during this time, is that he had an uncle, I believe, who was an alcoholic. So he had some personal reference and a relationship.
When you started this process and this movement, it seemed like there was a lot of learning that you had to do. Were you a person who was always involved in cause leadership or moving things forward prior to what happened?
Sort of. The reason I say sort of is I remember the press was interviewing me one time when my father was sitting there, and they asked me a similar question. And my dad said, "Oh my God, she's always been so stubborn and obstinate and, blah, blah, blah." I mean, I started the Junior Order of Palatine Nuns in Catholic school when I was in Catholic school until I was kissed by my boyfriend and decided, I didn't want to be a nun. I mean, I was always starting some, little thing here and there. So, I mean, nothing on the order of this. I was married for some years to an officer in the Air Force. And when we were in Okinawa, I did start a group, and I'm trying to think of the name of it, which I can't, for latchkid teens who were left alone because their parents worked. And I did start like a community thing for teens and a hotline for suicides. And this was in Okinawa many, many years ago. And volunteered for the Red Cross and gave death notices. So, I guess to some degree, I was always rather active and involved to the extent that I could be. Mm-hmm. But I wasn't political, by the way. I wasn't even a registered voter. I didn't even know the difference between a Democrat and a Republican when I started MAD. Had no clue. And didn't know I had to register to vote. I remember being told that by someone who worked for the governor, and he said, "Well, what party are you?" Because I was trying to figure out who to ask to carry my bills. And he says, "Well, what party are you?" And I said, "I don't know what you mean by that." And he says, "Well, when you vote." And I said, "Vote." He said, "Well, do you vote Republican, Democrat?" And I said, "Beats me." So he did. He sent me, he was actually a very good friend, but he sent me out of the office and he said, "You go down and register to vote and don't come back until you do." So I went out and asked the secretary, I said, "Where do I go to register to vote?"
That is so funny. One of the things that I admire so much about your work is how you were able to counter what I call the bystander effect. How people want to have a tendency to be apathetic, to remain on the periphery if they're seeing somebody that might be engaging in behavior that's dangerous or to themselves or to someone else. And your movement was able to skip over that, and that is so powerful. That you encouraged people to speak up, take the keys. You've given someone a very actionable and really quite easy step. And one of the things that we know about behavioral change is you have to make it easy.
You do. Keep it simple is the motto here.
Right. When I think about distracted driving, in particular, texting, now that seems like an even more prolific problem than drunk driving. Would you agree? Is it a tougher hill to climb, or does it feel the same to you?
It's a tougher hill to climb. It's socially acceptable, unfortunately, like drunk driving was. When I started MAD, 25,000 people a year were being killed in alcohol-related crashes. And now it's down to 10,000, I think, or 11,000, much less, although it's been going up. Drunk driving normally happens, or impaired driving, at certain hours, usually between, I think it's 10 and 2 in the morning, certain hours of the night. Distracted driving is an all-day thing. People do it first thing in the morning, and they do it all through the night. And I mean, it's an all-day thing. So you can't have specifically targeted police presence like you can with drunk driving for distracted driving. And for drunk driving, we had sobriety checkpoints. Well, you can't do that with distracted driving. So and also we had laws for drunk driving, which up until very recently, we haven't had for distracted driving. And in many cases, and in a number of states, they're still not primary laws.
Does it feel like, Candace, that you're right back at the beginning? Because I'm listening to you tell this story and you're trying to raise the awareness about distracted driving. Do you feel like you're right back at the beginning when you started raising the awareness about drunk driving?
Well, yes and no. And the reason I say yes, in some ways, but no, because there's so many other groups that work on this issue. Whereas with drunk driving, it was MAD.
You bring up other groups, Candace. I'm aware when we first spoke that you consult with people who are wanting to bring about change. Mm-hmm. And I want to give you the opportunity to talk about what you do and what you offer, because we have a lot of cause leaders that we hope are tuning in to us that may be interested in learning more about how you can help them.
I work with groups. I've been working with a group now who started a movement about fentanyl because her son was killed by fentanyl. And I've worked with other groups who have issues with the hospitality industry, or one woman that I've talked to who her son was killed in Mexico at a Hilton hotel due to carbon monoxide poisoning. And I didn't know this, but not all states have laws that mandate those detectors in hotel rooms. Did you know that?
I didn't know.
And nor have I ever asked. Yeah, I've never asked the hotel where I stay, do you have detector? I will now. But anyway, so, and I've had people contact me who've been the victims of sexual assault and all kinds of horrible things. And so, I help first advise them about whether or not they should start something. Mm-hmm. And I don't always believe that they should. And there are a number of times when I've said, really, if you can find a movement that exists that is similar to what you want to do, I really encourage you to join them. And if they don't do exactly what you want, join them and suggest that they do, and you will head up that whatever issue or, whatever it is. Because number one, we have so many nonprofits. And number two, not everybody really understands the sacrifice that you have to make if you're really going to start a cause and be successful.
You've been called the mother of movements. Mm-hmm. We even introduced that when we started this discussion today. How does that title make you feel? What are your thoughts about that?
Oh, great. People will say, what was your biggest success with MAD? And I say, it is the fact that I have been used and am still used, I understand from articles I see periodically, as an example of what people can do to make a difference and to right a wrong. And that to me is my biggest success. The fact that I have inspired so many other people to do something similar, I think is absolutely terrific, because I can tell you right now, we do not have a society that initiates legislation based on prevention. It's based on proaction after something tragic has happened. And if it weren't for these groups, we wouldn't even have that in most cases, which is really screwy, in my opinion.
That's right. Thank you. You know, one of the things we asked our last guest, we always ask them to leave a question for the next guest. So our previous guest has a question for you, Candace, and it's this. What is the one thing that keeps you doing the work? What is the point of light in your work that keeps you going?
Passion. And I will tell you in all truthfulness, I don't have the same passion that I did for legislation, for example. So that's not a real priority in my life. But I do have a passion for campaigns like National Passenger Safety Week, et cetera. We have another one coming up, 100 Deadliest Days of Summer, which is a real thing. And so we're getting ready to really kind of launch a major campaign. So anything that keeps me passionate, and it usually needs to be something new and different that others haven't done or isn't being done to my satisfaction, will keep me going. So passion.
I love it. Do you have a question for our next guest?
What do you do when you feel defeated? When you feel like you just can't go on anymore? When you feel it's not working, you know, that you shouldn't continue doing this. Maybe something didn't happen that you hoped to happen or whatever. What is it that you do to overcome that particular obstacle? Because it happens to all of us. So what is the thing that would keep you going despite enormous odds, I guess?
Candace, you're asking that question is so powerful. I think so many cause leaders would look at you and think she won every battle she fought, and it was all an easy ride. And we know that that's not true. And having you of all people acknowledge that, I think, is so powerful and helpful. And that's what this program is about. Trying to support one another when leading causes and leading movements can be lonesome and can be tough. So I want to say thank you so much for being an example for all of us and reminding us that you have to press on, you have to keep moving, and you have to keep digging and keep hold of that passion. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it. And I told you I love the name of the show.
The Science of Good interviews support the work of For Goodness Sakes, a communications firm that uses behavioral change principles to help nonprofits and government agencies advance social causes. Learn more at fgsakes.com.